Hello, my name is Jeff Jamiello, and today, oddly enough, I'm going to talk about freedom. Right now, we're going to talk about, let's go dig through the definition of freedom. Freedom is a very interesting thing. Looking up in dictionary.com, there was like a dozen, if not more, definitions, and some of them made a reference to freedom, and I looked that up, and it's like dozens more, but none of them really made me happy. So let's just go with freedom and go from there. Definition number 1, the state of being free or at liberty rather than confinement or physical restraint. Basically, do I have free movement? Do I have the ability to move freely? I like it, but it's not perfect, but I like it. Number 2, exemption from external control, interference, and regulation. I guess the logic there, well, okay, I'll go with that one. So far, we'll go with that one. Number 3, the power to determine action without constraint. Number 4, political or national independence. Flesh taller than that, baby. America hasn't been free in years. Remember, when we actually had the Revolutionary War to break away from England, it's because the king wanted to raise taxes by 1% or a penny or something per tea bag, I guess, or tea for tea, period. And we revolted. Right now, the founding fathers would have a stroke if they find out what's going on now. But one interesting movie, if you want to go over and dig into that one, is The Patriot. I wouldn't watch the whole movie, but the first part of the movie, there's actually a famous saying where Mel Gibson says, "Why would I want to trade," referring to the King of England, "why would I want to trade one tyrant 2,000 miles away for 2,000 tyrants 1 mile away?" And that's the situation we're in now, 2,000 tyrants a mile away. So think about that. But I'm not interested now, and that's not the freedom I'm referring to. I don't even know why it's there, to be honest with you. It doesn't seem like it's even right. Number 5, the absence of or the release of ties and obligations. Okay, so I get the freedom to do what I want. I don't know. That's only picked 5. I said I'm not going any farther than that. I'm currently at a dilemma because a couple of these could kind of fit. But those are definitions. Because technically, freedom is literally not being confined or physically restrained. That technically is correct. But also has to do with other things. Example is when you're confined and restrained in your actions. And remember, it talks about actions, the power to determine actions without constraint. Actions that are constrained, you make poor choices. Just like when you're under pressure. When you're under pressure, you make horrible choices. You make a different choice when, say, you just became unemployed. At this point, you panic, you take the next job that comes your way. That's a panic. That's not freedom. Freedom is having the ability to wait it out a little bit and say, okay, let's see, I want a good job. And you have in your mind, you got a good job and you're going to stick to it. Doesn't mean you don't have to, wait forever. It does mean you usually have a time constraint of this is how long I'm going to go before I give up and take a job that's not as good as I want it to be. It's generally jobs that are terrible are always there. I'm just telling you about that out there. As a software developer, it's very easy to get a junior developer job. The problem is if you keep getting junior developer jobs and you're a senior, what does it say about you? Right now, I'm saying to myself and to the world, I value me. And people kind of forget that. Now, I also looked it up and said, okay, well, What does the Bible say about freedom? And as crazy as it sounds, it has a lot to say about it. So let's go run through a couple. First one is 2 Corinthians 3:17, but I'm actually going to read 3:16 through 18. It says, whenever, though, they turn to face God as Moses did, God removes the veil, and there they are, face to face. They suddenly recognize that God is a living, personal presence, not a piece of chiseled stone. And when God is personally present, a living spirit, that old constricting legislation is recognized as obsolete. You're free of it. All of us. All of us. Nothing between us and God. Our face is shining with the brightness of his face. And so we are transfigured, much like the Messiah, our lives gradually becoming brighter and more beautiful as God enters our lives and we become like him. Next one I have is John 8:36. But I'm going to read 34 to 38. So we get a context for it. Jesus said, I tell you most solemnly that anyone who chooses a life of sin is trapped in a dead-end life and is, in fact, a slave. A slave can't come and go at will. The son, though, has an established position, the run of the house. So if the Son sets you free, you are free through and through. I know you are Abraham's descendants, but I also know that you are trying to kill me because my message hasn't yet penetrated your thick skulls. I'm talking about things I have seen while keeping company with the Father, and you just go on. Do what you have heard from your Father. The next one is 1 Corinthians 6:12. I'm going to read 6:12. Just because something is technically legal doesn't mean it's spiritually appropriate. If I went around doing whatever I thought I could get by with, I'd be a slave to my whims. I like it. And the next one I'm going to read is Galatians 5:5. And I'm going to read, it says 13 to 14, but actually I'm going to read 13 to 15 to make sure I got the context. It says, it is absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. Just make sure that you don't use your freedom as an excuse to do whatever you want to do and destroy your freedom. Rather, your freedom to serve one another in love, and how freedom grows. For everything we know about God's Word is summed up in a single sentence. Love others as you love yourself. That's an act of true freedom. If you bite and ravage each other, watch out. In no time at all, you will be annihilating each other, and where you have precious freedom be then. That was interesting. Next one I'm going to read is Galatians 3:22, but it's actually going to be 21 and 22 to ensure we get the context right. If such is the case, is the law, then an anti-promise, a negotiation of God's will for us, not at all. Its purpose was to make obvious to everyone that we are in ourselves out of right relationships with God, and therefore to show us the futility of devising some religious system for getting our own efforts what we can only get by waiting in faith for God to complete his promise. For if any kind of rule keeping his power to create life in us, we would certainly have gotten it by this time. The next one is Ephesians 3:12, which actually I'm going to read Ephesians 3:11 to 13. As this is proceeding along lines planned all along by God, and they executed in Christ Jesus. When we trust him, we're free to say whatever needs to be said, bold to go wherever we need to go. So don't let your present trouble on your behalf get you down. Be proud. I like it. Next one I'm going to read is Psalm 119:45. But it's going to be Psalm 119:41 to 48 to make sure we got the context right. Let your love, God, shape my life with salvation exactly as you promised. Then I'll be able to stand up to mockery because I trusted your word. Don't even deprive me of truth, not ever. Your commandments are what I depend on. Oh, I'll guard with my life what you've revealed to me. Guard it now, guard it ever. And I'll stride freely through wide open spaces as I look for your truth and your wisdom. Then I'll tell the world what I find. Speak out boldly in public, unembarrassed. I cherish your commandments. Oh, how I love them, relishing every fragment of your counsel. I like it. Next, we're going to read Psalms 118:5, but we're actually going to read 5 to 16, actually, to make sure we get the whole context, even though it's right in the beginning. We're going to get it all. It says, push to the wall, I called to God. For wide open spaces he answered. God's now at my side, and I'm not afraid. Who would dare lay a hand on me? God's my strong companion. I flick off my enemies like flies. Far better to take refuge in God than trust in people. Far better to take refuge in God than to trust in celebrities. Hemmed in by barbarians, in God's name I rubbed their faces in the dirt. Hemmed in and with no way out, in God's name I rubbed their faces in the dirt. Like swarming bees, like wild prairie fire, they hemmed me in. In God's name I rubbed their faces in the dirt. I was right to the cliff edge, ready to fall, when God grabbed and held me. God's my strength, and always my song, and also my song. And now he's my salvation. Hear the shouts, hear the triumph songs in the camp of the saved. The hand of God has turned the tide. The hand of God is raised in victory. The hand of God has turned the tide. And the last one is 1 Peter 2:16, which we're going to read 13 to 17 to ensure we got the context. Make the master proud of you by being good citizens. Respect the authorities. Whatever their level, they are God's emissaries for keeping order. It is God who will be doing good. You might cure the ignorance of the fools who think you're a danger to society. Exercise your freedom by serving God, not by breaking the rules. Treat everyone you meet with dignity. Love your spiritual family. Revere God. Respect the government. Thank you for listening to that. Basically, that was what the Bible says. And actually, there's probably a dozen more that I've seen. I did a search and it came up with a whole bunch of those. There's like 30 of them. I just took the first 10. And I kind of looked at them over, and they're kind of all right. I did read them in context. The reason is I actually dislike when people read the one line. It's like, okay, it's just a tagline. But it makes more sense when you put it all into context. And that's one thing I do like about the message. Actually, it'll group them into contexts. So it kind of makes sense to you when you're reading it. So when you're reading a little piece of it, it means nothing. But when you read the whole thing, it means a little bit better. All this being said about freedom, clearly the Bible talks about freedom a lot. But what does freedom mean to people? It's kind of a rough call, isn't it? Well, I know to incarcerated people, freedom means a lot, based on those definitions. For almost a week, I was in jail. Whole time I was there, I did not like it. To the point where I'll never do it again. To talk about repent. Never do that again. Ultimately, actually, all of it got expunged. But realistically, I did not like being in jail, and I'm sure everyone that was in jail didn't want to be there. That's a kind of a freedom. When they get out there thinking about their freedom, what are they going to do? Am I going to go back to kind of doing crime? Am I going to go over in straight and narrow? Ideally, we would like everyone to come out of there and, straight and narrow and be good, but I may not always be right. But you have that choice. I look at other ones. I look at oppressed people. I've been overseas. Oppressed people? There's a lot of oppressed people. I myself have been oppressed. I grew up in a family oppressed. So I could talk about being oppressed. The first thing when you were a kid, you wanted to get a car. You wanted to get the heck out of here. That's why I don't understand kids nowadays. It's almost like actually they have an entire generation who doesn't know what freedom actually is. A car was your first piece of freedom. I go, because actually I think your job was your first piece of freedom. But car provided you with the mechanism to leave, to depart, to do whatever you wanted to do. It's not like you go to work and you make money to afford things. But a car allowed you to go places with people. So that's what I don't get nowadays when everyone goes over and does the Lyft and this, and no one has like a car. And you are free somehow. That kind of means, you have to call Grubhub to get your food. You have to kind of do it. And mind you, they don't walk, so they just call, other people with other vehicles. So you take you basically throwing your freedom in the garbage and not doing a thing. But there's oppressed people around the world who are beg for freedom. There's people around the world right now that are trying to come to America, and we're not real free here. But they're coming here because it's better than what they left. I get it. I've been overseas. The next piece is military people. The people who really understand freedom is military people. I was in the Marines. I was on a ship for 3 times for 6 months, nowhere to go. You were confined to a ship basically for 6 months. It's like being in prison. Well, except you did a job. In my case, it was twice I was on laundry. Well, once I was on laundry duty, twice on mess duty, which means you work 7 days a week. And when you're in port, maybe you'll get 2 hours to go over and walk around town, supervised. That's the military. So when you leave the military, it was such a structured life. You are not only begging for freedom, but you know what freedom is because you've had it removed. People now don't know what the freedom actually is. How about doing what you're told, for a couple of years, even though you don't like it, but you have to do it. Orders are orders. But military people, they understand freedom. One thing that's always amazed me is, I said, when I did go overseas, the couple times that I did get allowed to get off ship, it was usually for a detail or it was supervised, which is fine. I don't care. A couple times, when I first went overseas, everyone would just drink and do the woman thing, kind of thing. You're on shift for 6 months. And it was just kind of odd because they would kind of segregate you off, and you were with these people. And they're looking at, where's my neck? I'm going to go get some alcohol. And I looked around and said, wow, look at the architecture here. You know how if you look at old movies, especially World War II movies, you're going back, okay? You're talking your 40s. You look at the way the buildings are built and all that. I'm like, oh, no one builds them that way. You look at, from the 40s, you look at how buildings in America were. They were very similar to how they were in Europe. But nowadays, buildings are very different. Buildings in Europe, most of Europe, are actually still the same they were 100 years ago. So you go there and it's like, wow, that's a cobblestone road? Seriously? And they're proud of it. Oh, look, we built this 200 years ago or 150 years ago. They have houses and they're proud of their houses. Not here. Here we just kind of try to get rid of it and put something, aesthetically not pleasing. I find that architecture is now dead. Other than being overseas, it's actually dead in America because there's no money in it. That's kind of the logic is we want to make everything for the cheapest as possible. But anyway, I'm diverging from freedom. And people look at these, and when you start associating with them, you walk around, just walking around town. The simple act of getting a pizza. I'll tell you a story about getting a pizza. I was in Italy, I got a pizza. And I found out that pizza is American. But I did find a pizzeria. And me and a friend of mine, I think we had 2 beers and a whole large pizza. Other than a very big gap in language, it was a pizza shop. That's all they sold, so it was kind of easy. And basically, we did get a pizza and found out that it's made with olive oil. It's the first time I've ever had olive oil. And it's probably virgin olive oil at that. American pizza is made crappily. Yes, my dog woke up. What's interesting about the pizza is you learned a lot because you sat in it, you looked inside, you went inside a little restaurant, which literally actually had 2 tables. There wasn't more than 2. They had a big heath where they cooked the pizza, and they literally shoved it in there. So literally they couldn't make 2 or 3. There was no takeout orders back then. It was the 80s. It's like, wow. So literally this person, as much as we look at it and say that's a simple life, what's wrong with that? Really? We have a more complicated life now. As much as people look at it and say, well, it's a simple life, I also look at it and say it's also a very complicated life. Right now I think we have this simple life. You got simple people. Maybe they followed some sort of higher guidance. But here in America, we kind of, we run to the grocery store, we got a very, complicated life. Like, no, actually you don't. How about living 100 years ago when you actually had to go over and grow your food? You had to trade with others for your food. You had to actually have a skill that people were willing to pay money for. And I said, well before social media, well before the internet. People kind of forget that sometimes, is that I have a feeling that we're going to slowly head back to the simple life and simple people. And I have no disagreement with it. Because we've overcomplicated our life a lot. A lot. And we all kind of look at it and say, oh, well, we're free. Well, no, actually you're not. There's not a single, you can go today. Literally, you can go today, get a backpack, get a tent, go into a park, or you go into anywhere that's not owned by anybody, camp on it, and you'll be arrested. Because you're required to have, you're required to get a permit for something from somebody. For every drop of land on this planet. Every drop of land in America actually is taxed. And you're required to actually pay taxes on it. That's the scary part. Being a homeless person, actually, you're in violation of several laws because, not only are you unemployed, and you're actually homeless. Because you're homeless, you can't be anywhere. That's kind of the logic. Now, mind you, if you're a female, they have shelters all over the place. For males, they do not. Because males, oh no, we just want to protect the females, keep them off the streets from getting into trouble, from trouble happening to them. Okay, well, we're back to there's a reason why we send men to war. That being said, I have a very interesting story. My adopted father said one day that, I don't think he actually believed this, but he said it, he heard it somewhere and he kind of repeated it and he kind of laughed at it. It was, if Jesus came back right now, he'd be put in a mental institution. I'm like, okay. Now, first of all, bear in mind, I didn't know Jesus was coming back. So that was news to me, like, okay. So it kind of didn't mean anything at that point because I really wasn't following religion all that much. But let me just modernize that for you because that was close to 40 years ago. Let's modernize it for the 2020s. If Jesus actually came, he'd be sedated with mandatory drugs that you had to take because you didn't conform to the rest of society. Now, the funny thing about it is I really don't think that's any different treatment than he got back then. They thought, he was crazy then, so. But remember this, Jesus is the only person that you can mention his name, and worldwide everyone knows who he is. Regardless if they follow him or not, they know who he is. That's a pretty good word recognition. The only one I think better, actually, I think is God. So, that's interesting. But it's a very interesting analysis of it because my adopted father wasn't wrong. Nowadays, people give them drugs for all kinds of things. People just think people are crazy. Like, well, fortunately, they don't lock people up anymore, so that's even worse. Because actually now you can just go over and see a doctor. They prescribe some drugs. They kind of maybe work, maybe don't. And they just keep upping up the dosage. And then when that doesn't work, they switch to another one. And you're just a guinea pig in this whole process. I don't really believe in psychiatry at all at that point. Psychiatry with giving drugs? No. And oddly enough, if you do your research, the psychiatry with giving drugs actually started in the military. Back in the 60s, with the Vietnam War, they needed something to cope. People to cope. Can't have everyone smoke a pot all day. That's really what it was. Dealing with the horrors of what they saw. Don't get me wrong, and the military has always had to deal with that, so that other people do not. And that's one thing about freedom, is it's not free. Everyone thinks it is, but it's not. Someone paid their life for you to be free. I said, I have a very unpopular opinion. I have a very unpopular opinion about the draft. I think we should draft all kinds of women all over the place. But I look at it very simply. You want to play the man game? Do the man thing. That also means that when a woman dies, you don't get to splash it around the news. The press is real big about that. They like that fear porn. They do a lot. It sells. And they will sit there, why do we have women in the military when this one got killed? It doesn't matter that 200 over here got killed. That's okay, 200 men, that's fine. They're just nothing. And that's the problem. There is a very big discrepancy, double standard there. And I'm against a double standard. I said, 100 women died, don't care either. Now, if you don't care about 200, you don't care about 100. Technically, we should care about all of them. But the fact remains is they make such a big deal out of it. And you want equal rights? There won't be equal rights until you fix that problem. The fact that we have a media that loves to show, to sell ratings, to make, fear porn. That's what they do. They don't report news anymore. Look at the 24-hour cycle. Something happens, and then they get all those, quote, people that they got on the chain to talk about what happened to talking heads, and they'll talk for the next 24 hours about that one little thing. They'll speculate. Oddly enough, I think you should go to jail for speculation, what these people do. They cause more fear than anything else. I don't know. I just know that I'm currently free. So I'm free of any encumbrances. The Bible does talk about it. And I do believe that 90% of America doesn't understand what it is to be free. And actually, that is age restricted, oddly enough. Generally, the baby boomers, they don't know what it's like. They don't actually know what freedom is because they make a lot of money off of you not being free. That's kind of the problem. You got two choices of cell phone carriers, two cell phones, Android or Apple. Tell me it's not a big game. As I said, two operating systems, really. Microsoft or Apple. You got Linux. I run Linux, oddly enough. I go, but then you sit there and you look on the YouTube, the fear porn of, people are unhappy with it. I don't care if they are or not. You have a choice. That's the point of freedom, is the freedom of choice. To do what you want to do. I do strongly recommend that people think about it. Think about, are you really free? Because actually, if you live in America, you're not really free. And I'd be willing to say that I don't care what country you're in, you're not actually free. Some people are free. Well, technically, rich people are free. Because they really don't pay taxes either, so. I'm sure there's some that pay taxes, but they usually skirt ways around it. But regardless, I want to talk today about freedom. It came into my mind yesterday, and the Lord put it upon my heart. We want to talk about it. So, I was actually very shocked to find out there's a lot of references to freedom biblically. And it usually involves freedom from sin, kind of implying that people used to have freedom for sin, which is kind of correct in a way. You got God's will and free will. Are they the same? Depends on how aligned you are with God. So, I just want to point that out there, and I actually wanted to give, hats off to people in Europe. Simple people. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I wish we'd get more simple here, actually. As I see people drive around with DoorDash and Grubhub, and I'm like, you're shaking their head like, so you're too lazy to get in your own damn car, or we won't go there to go get your stuff. Like, it's troubling, very troubling, because when a lot of things could happen. Example is gasoline doubles in price. Gasoline doubles in price. It's not economical for for Grubhub. Worse, what happens when 30% of the population is laid off or unemployed? At that point, you don't have enough people to pay unemployment, so therefore it means unemployment system goes ka-flush. No one ever thinks of that one, huh? At that point, you pretty much got a broken down society at 30%. Government services aren't going to work. You almost have rioting. I hope not, but other countries have had much less for less percentages. But from a freedom perspective, I wish everyone was free. I wish everyone would actually recognize that some of us are not free and think about it. Think about why you're not free and take actions to fix that. I'm not saying you should go out and revolt or rebel or quit your job. I go, think how you can be more free today. Even in the Bible it talks about government. You're supposed to listen to your government. I go, but how can you be more free? That could be free with your time, freedom with your time. You're going to volunteer at a shelter. You see a homeless guy, walking around with his hand out, give him a couple dollars, see what happens. At the very least, you'll maybe change his life. Yeah, he may go over and drink it or take drugs, maybe. But he may also come to God. What's even scarier is that person could be representative of God, could be an angel. Happens more than you think. A lot of tests. So think about it. But I strongly encourage you, think about freedom for a minute. Because people get the wrong idea. Don't get me wrong. Capitalism is a pretty good system when we don't got governments interfering and playing little games. When it's all an even playing field, problem is we don't have even playing fields anymore. A lot of times our freedoms are taken away. Some people's freedoms are taken away so others could have them. Oddly enough, financially, freedom is a funny thing because rich people do it all the time. They make money a certain way and then they'll basically forbid anyone else to make money that same way. So they're the ones that pass laws to stop making money how they made money. And that's really funny because it's very hypocritical of them. But they do it all the time. So, anyway, that's my thoughts on freedom. Thank you for listening and have a great day.